If we were right about something yesterday, doesn't mean that we'll continue to be right about it tomorrow. No one should fall in love with their own ideas or the ideas of their colleagues for that matter, because they might be obsolete.
Welcome to The Visionaries. I'm your host, Nikki Greenberg. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Jussi Herlin, Vice Chairman of the Board at KONE Corporation, a global leader in the elevator and escalator industry. As a sixth-generation family member involved in this business, Jussi brings a unique perspective on the intersection of tradition and innovation. Beyond his work at KONE, he also serves on several Finnish technology boards focusing on urbanization, sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion. In this episode, Jussi will share his journey as a young leader on a board filled with seasoned executives and how KONE is embracing cutting-edge technologies like robotics and AI, and the company's commitment to sustainability and DEI. You won't want to miss this insightful discussion about how to lead with vision in a rapidly changing world. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to share it with your friends, family, or colleagues. Jussi, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks a lot, Nikki. It is a pleasure on my behalf as well.
Jussi, now I have to underline this because it's quite incredible that you were in your 20s when you joined the board at KONE Corporation, which is such a rare thing to have a young leader join the board of a very serious company. So when you were invited 17 years ago, yes, we're going to give your age away a little bit. You're still a young leader, but especially then you were an especially young leader. Now, you came there and you're already equipped with your economics degree. You had some years of experience, but you were still in a room filled with seasoned executives and leaders with decades of experience and stellar track records. So how did you navigate this environment? How did you strategically maximize this opportunity while actually ensuring that your voice was still being heard?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question, and of course, for context, and as mentioned, that KONE is a family company, so I did have the benefit of being in the right family when I was invited to the board. But it was also, I think, very much understood that I'm not expected the same way that as a seasoned executive or present or former CEO who would join the board, they would be expected to contribute fully from year one. But for me, I think the expectation was to really, focus a lot on listening and learning for the first couple of years. And I mean, it's I think an underrated skill, listening still today. In the world, but the idea is to learn from these executives and tycoons of industry who have been around the block a couple of times, and then it was of course an investment into the future. So I think the idea was that I would stay on the board for a considerable time, which I of course now have. It was understood by the chairman as well as myself that I will have time in the future to contribute more.
So when you did start wanting to have a voice, and I think it's great that you came in there, you were humble, you were there to learn, watch, listen, you understood the power of who was in the room. When you did want to come in as a young person and have a voice, how did you start doing that?
I said little by little and focusing on the things I felt I knew more about. So, I had an economics degree, like you mentioned, but really, it's an economics degree doesn't give you too much experience. It gives you some theoretical understanding. But as my experience on the board level grew, and then I gained more experience from working outside of KONE as well, then I would gain more confidence in opining on this or that issue. But it was a gradual process.
So for those young leaders that are out there, and I think especially within the startup scene, you get a lot of younger people joining advisory boards or joining the boards. What would be your advice to them, whether they're sitting on a board where they're surrounded by other young, enthusiastic people, or they're sitting on a board where there are a lot more industry titans and tycoons and more experienced people? What would be your advice to them about how to be an active learner, but also have a voice within the room?
That's a good question. I don't presume to have the final answer or the full answer to that question. I'd say, broadly speaking, it's good to know if when joining a board, for example, it's good to sort of also understand what is the profile that or the sort of role I'm fulfilling on the board. For whether it's a young person or more experienced, they usually, boards will seek to complement the expertise of the board at any given time. So then, this as this is happening, then it's good to understand, well, what am I meant to bring to the board? What is the role that I'm starting with? Of course, every board member, hopefully contributes holistically, but then it's when you know that, okay, for example, I joined the board because of my experience in consumer electronics, for example. Then when questions that relate to that, then it's of course easier to say something.
So I suppose what it sounds to me is like you're describing truly a team. You know what your function is. I hate to use the expression, but you're somewhat conscious to stay in your lane. You're not going to kind of pop around on things that you don't have expertise on. There are people in the room that do have expertise on. You contribute where you know you're qualified to bring an insight, something that you're knowledgeable about. Is that fair to say? It's like you know your role. You really hone in on that, but you also give people the space to be experts in their domain.
Yeah, I think that's very close, to what I'm talking to or what I was talking about as well. I mean, it's a fine line between, thinking out loud confidently versus only, like you said, staying in your lane. And there's a fine line between, offering an uneducated opinion and then feeling like, if you're an expert on one thing, then suddenly you're an expert on everything. But I think that, if a board is well put together, so it has a diversity of experience, and if the board has a working practice that then can fully utilize all that wealth and breadth of experience, then no one has to be an expert on everything.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've observed is, and I'm going to refer to them as young people. You and I were about the same age. We're both at the older end of being millennials, but we're still millennials. And I certainly find that sometimes when I'm in a room or conversation or a meeting with some of these, for lack of a better word, young people, for them, there seems to be this expectation, maybe an internal expectation that they have to suddenly be an expert at everything without having the experience. And I don't think our generation really felt that. I think because we had more of a traditional learning and a traditional path. And I sometimes caution younger people saying, you don't have to pipe up at everything. You're here for a reason. You're good at certain things, but no one's expecting you to have the same wealth of knowledge as somebody that's been here for 50 years or has been the CEO of a company. Your strengths are different. I even said this to a manager once, I said, you're not qualified to comment on this. This is for the engineers to comment on. You've got to really play to your strengths, but not try to prove yourself that you're the smartest person and you need to be there. But I think you brought up a very important point about diversity. And I think age diversity is something that we don't talk about nearly enough. This diversity of experience, this diversity of upbringing. And one of the things that I love when I look at the KONE website is looking at the board members page and how the year that they were born in is included. So you can get a sense of what generation they're from. And each generation is really influenced by the factors that are around them at the time, whether it's technology or, economic factors, etc. And I noticed that your board spans the silent generation, baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials. How do you believe your contribution as a millennial and your unique perspective comes into play?
Well, first of all, I mean, thank you, and let's just underline that we are both very young still, and I think for you as well as was for me, there have been many times that I've been the youngest person in the room. Certainly in the boardroom for many years, I was the youngest person, and of course, as every year that passes makes it a little less likely to be the youngest person in the room, and and which is of course a blessing that new younger generations come and join the game. Yeah, so KONE does have a fairly age diverse board, and I've been thinking about that actually when it comes to the business that KONE is doing, KONE's industry. I think that the older board members definitely have very forward-looking, very fresh ideas and feedback on the strategy of KONE and where it's going, and they're very, very up to date. So there isn't this huge generational gap between any of the different generations. I think there's a fair level of course, healthy debate on issues, but it isn't just along the sort of my generation versus yours. So the debate sort of transcends the age diversity.
That's great. And of course, it's also, your board is very diverse in terms of gender, skill set, and other dimensions, which is always what you're looking for in terms of diversity.
Exactly. Can I just add to that? I mean, board diversity is it's coming as a recommendation in some places. It's becoming a more codified recommendation, and there's a lot of explaining to do if you don't fulfill the goals. And I think in the bottom of diversity is, of course, is that when you have a diverse board, you're more likely to have a diverse experiences and diverse opinions. And seeing as how KONE, for example, is a company that the user base is just the entire urban population of the world, which is growing every day, then it is a very diverse group. So we should try to reflect that diversity also on every level of the organization.
I love that. When you think about your customer group, it's like, well, it's everyone. It's everyone on the planet, which is everybody needs to go somewhere and a little bit quicker. But I might actually change gears a little bit and talk about, KONE itself and some of the technology solutions, because I'm a big fan of technology. I love building technology, and I love some of the solutions that your company has come up with, which I really think push to the next generation. And I often reference in some of my keynotes how you have the elevator that is designed to have a robot, and I mean a robot, come in, wheel its way in, and be able to get to where it's going, which to me is a key enabler of this future in which we're going to have robots roaming around our buildings. So, how are technologies like AI and robotics impacting the KONE business? What is the company's commitment to cutting edge technologies, and coming from being a very traditional company that has very traditional stakeholders, that you're pushing the boundaries and perhaps even asking for things that your customers aren't yet asking for? How does that come about?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, the construction industry isn't known to being the most revolutionary industry, isn't known for its jumps in productivity over the last decades, and for sure, sometimes we will have solutions that the industry isn't ready yet for. In terms of what technology is used for, I mean, it is a tool, whether it's robotics or generative AI or anything else. Really, it is a tool in service of the purpose of the company. In KONE's case, we want to shape the future of cities. And so if you have a clear purpose and you know what you want to achieve, then it's easier to think about the technologies that might help you in that. But you mentioned the robots in the elevators, and it is a pretty crazy thing that we are living in that sci-fi world where we're sharing these spaces with robots. Like you see cleaning robots, factory floors are full of robots, warehouses, and then now places such as hospitals and hotels as well. So the term, the slogan for KONE is dedicated to people flow. But actually now I guess we'll have to start considering these robots people too, because we are now also in effect helping them move through the buildings as well. Robots are now coming to construction yards as well. So, for example, Spot, the robot dog, made waves some years ago on YouTube by dancing and doing on parkour and other interesting things. So Spot is, of course, a very interesting type of robot that the way we are using it, or well, we're piloting it at the moment, is that it could be a helper on a construction yard. And, and if you've ever been to a construction yard, you know that one of those robots that move on wheels, like a cylinder on wheels, would never get very far. So you need to have agility that Spot, for example, offers. But the idea is that it can give feedback on the productivity of the construction site, and it can really improve the productivity. And another thing that is important in innovating for productivity, such in a place such as a construction site where there are a lot of different actors, is that we don't presume to have all the answers by ourselves. We don't presume to innovate just within our laboratories and our R&D facilities, but we have to create sort of openings and ways for third parties to help innovate with our products. And this is one of, this was also partially what was behind the robot butler that was mentioned, or these robots that, we have APIs where then third parties can come in and start thinking from their point of view what might be the next step in enabling people flow. So we need to innovate, but we can never assume that no one else could innovate in the same space where we are.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that in any industry, in any building, in our society, full stop, it really is about collaboration. And it sounds to me really what you're thinking about is, so we're talking about robotics in two different modes. We're talking about within the building and within construction while the building's being built. Now, within the building, by having an elevator that allows these robots to move around, these medical robots, these service robots, these robot butlers, what you're doing is that you're actually creating this free flow of movement for this robot. You're actually removing an obstacle for it to be able to operate effectively. So you're part of this ecosystem that says, yeah, we are a robot-ready environment. So you're actually enabling that for it to move around. It's almost like it's got its passport. It can move around. And then on the construction side, similarly, understanding that you're part of this ecosystem of different trades that are actually going, yeah, we will use technology and we will use it well. We will test out new things so that we can work with you and partner with you to improve the efficiency and be so much more effective. So, I think there is this difference in those that do embrace emerging technologies and say, yep, we're going to be towards the future. And those that go, you know what, we're not there yet. We're going to just keep slumping towards where we've always been. And I believe, especially with the emergence of AI and robotics and IoT, that we're going to start seeing an even bigger gap between those that are future focused and those that are tied to the past. What do you think about that?
Yes, this is definitely something that is happening, and it's tricky, of course, because you have to lean into the future. You have to lean into new ways of working, to new ways of fulfilling the customer needs. But then you still have to figure out which ones are the preferably you only lean in on the winning technologies and the winning solutions. So it's very tricky, and it certainly is it's a mindset question, really. Of adaptability. Maybe on the question about robots is interesting also in the way that they are a sort of a gateway, or they're an interface between the physical and the digital world. That the room service robot, it's a physical manifestation of a sort of a digital idea, but it's fulfilling a physical need. Like it'll deliver a bottle of water to a room when the receptionist is too busy. And the same thing with Spot on a construction site. So the fact that it's walking around on the site, there's no added value in that. But then it can capture things, like it can see things, and those things can then be analyzed automatically somewhere else with AI, and then we have new ideas, new insights into how the site is working, and that's where the value is created. So this is fantastic and very fascinating interplay between how the chaotic physical world then and interfaces with the digital one.
Absolutely, I hear you on that. And I think, Jussi, the other thing that I know about you is that it's almost like if you could have a billboard, it would say that you're really working at the intersection of technology, sustainability, and humanity. And if we come back to this notion of the human experience, leaving our robots behind for a little bit, can you maybe talk about your philosophy around urbanization, sustainability, and DEI? And on a practical level, what are some of the initiatives that you've been instrumental in helping to bring to life to align with this vision of yours?
So, there's a lot of very important issues that you just brought up. So let me try and address them a little bit, sort of one by one. Well, first of all, urbanization, it's a thing that's happening. It's a mega trend. Like 200,000 people move into cities every day. They're looking to prosper. They're looking for a happier life. They have needs. They have demands. And then they have to be able to be accommodated in cities. And this is a fantastic a challenge. It's a huge challenge for cities, for companies, for societies and communities. But there's no way to shy away from that challenge. The only thing we should do is to try and make urban life work for everyone. And I think we have a small part to play in that by making sure people's trips are smooth and safe and reliable in buildings. But I think it's a big old challenge that will require a lot of different public and private actors to really work together, because it's one of those things that it's not going to stop happening. I mean, even during COVID, there was a time when people asked, maybe this is the end of urbanization because people don't want to be living so close to others. But, it turns out COVID passed and urbanization hasn't stopped or really even slowed down. So we need to be able to think every day about how we can make urban life and life in the city better. And this is, referring back to our purpose to shape the future of cities. So this is the kind of future I'm talking about. There's a lot of things to shape. One of these big issues and big topics and big challenges of urbanization is carbon emissions. And which is, of course, it's a facet of a larger, let's say, ecological and environmental challenge. But if I sort of drill in on carbon emissions, we know that the built environment is responsible for almost 40% of carbon emissions in the world. And the elevators in the buildings do actually have a significant part of that. So whenever we can make our elevators less material intensive and less energy intensive, we will have a direct positive effect on the on reducing the carbon profile of a building and of a city, and this is another big challenge that we are running out of time. It's the definitive decade for climate action, and we're almost halfway through it already. So I have higher expectations and hopes for the second half than for the first half.
Similarly, when I look at problems in our world like global warming and the pollution, wastefulness, you name any kind of environmental problem, I just kind of put the numbers to it. And like as a property developer, sometimes we get a bad reputation because it's seen as, oh, you're building, you're adding density, you're building up, etc. But for me, I actually believe that density is the best direction that we can take. And just kind of going back to basics, because really, when you have density, you have a lot of people in one place, which means that the economics stack up. If you have a population of, call it 100,000 people in an area, it makes sense to build a station. It makes sense to invest in that, that initiative or that technology, or building something that will serve those people. So in addition, also thinking about when you have density, you can have less miles traveled on, getting from A to B. You can have more public transport, etc., etc. So for me, in my life's work, I focus on cities. I focus on density because this is where I think that I can be the most impactful, is looking at these conditions of great density. And I love how you have some tall buildings in the background with a park setting as well. So Jussi, before we move along, I know that you've done a lot of work in diversity and inclusion. Can you talk about your philosophy around this and maybe some of the initiatives that you've been instrumental in implementing?
This is an important question. I'm happy that we have a possibility to talk about it. So um, we touched a little bit on it when we talked about board diversity, and really, in terms of business logic, the same logic applies to the entire organization, and that is KONE's goal is as well to be as diverse as the societies that we and the communities that we serve. I think it's a no-brainer. It is both. It makes business sense and it makes moral sense to strive for a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce that can show up to work as their whole selves every day, and sort of who can then contribute to these common goals that we have at KONE. And I see a lot of positive development in the field. I'd say we're an engineering company in the construction industry, so I'd say we probably have a longer way to go than many other industries before we reach something approaching gender parity, for example. But it is something that we work hard on every day to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to contribute in the industry.
And I think also visibility goes a long way. I remember when I was in Helsinki and it was during, I don't know if it's Pride Week or Pride Month, and I went to some of the shopping centers and I saw these these huge KONE installations. And I was thinking, if I was from that community, how proud I'd feel to know, my employer is going out to the public, not having to do these things, but really quite literally waving the flag and saying, we care about these values and we're proud of these values, and we will sponsor these initiatives that really show that we want to have a place in a society where diversity, equity, inclusion is valued, and really champion it.
Absolutely. We stand behind these values, and like you said, we both figuratively and literally wave that flag, and we want to be building that society where the flag waving doesn't need to be for change, it can just be for celebration. And of course, then the work must continue when the flags are packed away. So then it needs to be, of course, a continuous effort within and between organizations to advance inclusivity. But I think June is a fun time to be in Helsinki, and especially the end of June when Pride Month really gets going.
I believe it. Now, we've touched on a lot of things here. We've spoken about what it means to be a young leader. We've spoken about your attitudes towards emerging technologies and being a front runner, a leader, an innovator in the space. We've spoken about your attitudes towards sustainability, diversity, and also creating a work environment where people are really proud of the corporation and looking to do better every day. To me, a lot of what you're talking about here really does embody future readiness. And might I ask, what advice might you give to individuals, managers, or organizations that are looking to become future ready?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think being future ready is not a what, but it's a how. There's no tech stack, there's no solution or a business model or anything like that will sort of guarantee that you're set for the future. But it's a how. It is a how you think and how you approach the world. So it's a mindset, I think, and a future ready mindset is one that emphasizes adaptability, meaning you are ready to pivot and change direction quickly if needed. That we have elasticity in our thinking, that we are not. If we were right about something yesterday, it doesn't mean that we'll continue to be right about it tomorrow. So no one should fall in love with their own ideas or the ideas of with their colleagues, for that matter, because they might be obsolete. So we have to have a lot of critical thinking, a lot of reflectivity and adaptability, and just be able to continue learning, because we're at this juncture right now where technology is advancing. It feels a lot that technology is advancing faster than our ability to really understand that technology. So we're still finding ways to to do things like with machine learning, even though now we're talking about Gen AI, and we're still sometimes we're still applying the very basic building blocks of digital transformation, maybe 5 or 10 or even more than 10 years later. At the same time, of course, we have to be applying the new things. But really, we as humans tend not to be as quick, and maybe especially when we're big organizations, we tend not to be as adept at changing and pivoting. And this, I think, is something that every organization that employs people, which still is, I'd say, majority of the organizations, they will have to be able to have this culture of continuous learning and agility and adaptability.
I love that. And there's a few points that you've mentioned that I'm kind of like jumping in my seat and getting excited about. I think one of the pieces of advice that I give to individuals and managers is, it's so basic, but I think it's so important. And it's that when you get these little pop-ups coming on your screen saying, hey, we've just done a software update and there's new tools. Would you like to have a tour and see them and try them out? I say everyone, but I mean me. I always say no. I'm like, just take the time to learn about the new things that the technology you're paying for can actually do, because the technology that we use is advancing. You're already paying for it. So I think there's these big jumps that we can take, but then there's also these little steps about learning new features, new things within what we're doing, and slowly over time adapting our own way of working to be more effective and more efficient. But I'll also tell you a little story, because you mentioned how sometimes for people it's the technology advances, but for us we kind of need to catch up. And there's this great anecdote about Alexander Graham Bell, who made the first telephone call. And what he did is he had his brand new telephone, he dialed something, don't know what the phone number was, and he got his assistant Watson on the line. First telephone call. And what does he say? He says, Watson, come over here, I have something to tell you. So, so even for him, he's a genius, but it didn't occur to him that he could tell him over the phone what he needed to do. He had to change his way of thinking because it's so new. It's so new. And I love what you said about adaptability, always learning, because this is the world we're living in. There's nothing that's completely 100% sure. The technology is going to keep evolving. The world that we live is going to keep evolving. We have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Nothing is certain for sure. But I might end with some rapid fire questions if you don't mind. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
All right. Quick little sound grabs for these ones. For you, are you a morning person or a night owl? When do you do your best work?
I try to be adaptable, but I'm a night owl. So after the kids go to bed, that's the second shift.
How do you structure your day? How do you structure your week?
My weeks and days are always different. So even within a week, every week is different. What I try to do in every week and every day, or every week at least, is to have several lunch meetings or other social meetings without like a strict agenda, to catch up on what is happening, as well as having time, like slow time, to do some slow thinking work.
I love that, because learning happens when you're out in the world. When you're stuck, do you actively seek solutions or give it time and space?
Depends on the problem. I tend to give things time and space, but if it's an urgent problem, then of course an urgent approach is needed. But I've learned that most problems, actually, you can give them some time, and then the answer might emerge by itself.
Which philosophers, theorists, or inventors inspire you?
So I think the most influential book I ever read was Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and that really got me into thinking about thinking. So I would have to mention Daniel Kahneman as one. A second person who's really changed my way of thinking is Johan Rockström, who's been leading a group of scientists who've developed this planetary boundaries model, and they are sort of pioneers of like a holistic scientific understanding of the boundaries of our planet. And maybe a third person is Caroline Criado Perez. She is an author who's written an interesting book about invisible women. It's about the data gaps we have when it comes to women versus men.
Brilliant. I'm a big Kahneman fan as well. if you like podcasts, there's a great podcast called The Hidden Brain, and there's a couple of episodes with Daniel Kahneman that are quite recent and just talking about the fallacies in our minds and how we make mistakes. So I geek out on that stuff too. What technology do you use to stay efficient, and are there AI tools that you're currently testing out?
So there's a technology that I use on a daily basis. It's not the most advanced one, but it keeps my life together. It's called Outlook Calendar. If something isn't in my calendar, it really doesn't exist, and I outsource my sort of temporal memory there. In terms of AI tools, I'm right now using ChatGPT 4.0, and I just started using Perplexity, which gives a little bit more of this, like, you see the sources and you get more sort of well-sourced answers. So if I need to be factually correct, then I veer towards that.
Do you have any hacks for people to use their Outlook calendar efficiently? Are you doing any color coding or any automations?
Oh no, I have like 4 or 5 different calendars at the moment. So it's really like a rainbow colored calendar at the moment, because it's the professional, it's personal, it's studies, and everything going on at the same time. Yeah, the only hack is that, put it there immediately.
Good one. I love that. And final question, how do you believe that we will work in the future, and how can we prepare?
This is more like, hey, let's have a full episode on that, because we could. This is such a fascinating subject. So what we're doing right now is, of course, we're using these very human-like technologies. We're chatting with chatbots and ChatGPT, and we're in talking to them, and they talk back to us, and they sound like humans. Sometimes they even sound like very specific humans, which of course can cause troubles if the specific human doesn't want to be a part of the show. But I think I believe that human ingenuity and creativity will remain in the focus of work. So I'm hoping that what Gen AI will do is it will take away a lot of the admin stuff and the stuff that doesn't add to our creativity, the stuff that doesn't help us come up with new things, so that we will have more of that slow time. Because I don't think that should be like a privilege if you can block some couple of hours in your calendar to go for a walk, because that might be when you get your best ideas. I mean, people usually have great ideas in the shower, but that's, I don't think a 2-hour shower is a sustainable solution either. But so collaboration, social skills, and creativity and problem solving skills are, I think, going to be in high demand in the future as well.
Yeah, and I love that. I'm with you on that 100%. If AI can take over the tasks that are, for lack of a better word, clutter in our day, and just free us up to be able to have that mental space, to be able to, love what we do, to be engaged in the conversations, to do high value, deep thinking, that I believe is important. And that I also believe is the future of work. This has been such a great conversation. I'd like to thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights. We took a few different dimensions to this, which I wanted to, because you're such an interesting person who, for me, really does represent this next generation that's coming through and coming into leadership positions. Thank you so much, Jussi. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch or learn more about you?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, first of all, Nikki, for the possibility to have this chat. We could have gone for a lot longer, clearly, on these subjects, so we just scratched the surface. And I like what you've done, and I'm hoping to see and hear more of these podcasts in the future as well. So I'm on LinkedIn. You will hopefully, I'll be tagged somewhere if this is going to be put in LinkedIn, so then I can be found there. I do have a handle on X, although I have been probably a little bit less active there lately. But otherwise, if someone wants to find me and they have Google, they'll probably be able to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much.
A big thank you to Jussi Herlin for joining us on The Visionaries and sharing his inspiring insights on leadership, sustainability, and the future of urbanization. If you're enjoying the podcast or finding it valuable, please consider rating or reviewing. It really helps us reach more listeners and spread these amazing stories. Be sure to share this episode with friends or colleagues who are passionate about innovation and the future of cities. You can also stay connected with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Nikki Greenberg. Thanks again for tuning in, and I look forward to having you join us on the next episode.